Mafia boss laughed when a Latina woman claimed she spoke 10 languages, but when she spoke in perfect Italian, he froze, speechless. Wait, before we start, tell us your city below. Then sit back, enjoy the story, and remember to subscribe for more great stories. The private dining room of Vesuvio's fell silent as Don Vittorio Moretti entered. Even the oldest capos lowered their eyes as he passed, the weight of his family name commanding respect without a single word spoken. At 33, he carried the legacy of 3 generations of power in his deliberate stride, in the perfectly tailored Brioni suit that draped his athletic frame, in the heavy gold signet ring bearing the Moretti crest. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice quiet yet carrying to every corner of the room. He never needed to raise it. Those who had failed to hear Vittorio Moretti's quiet commands rarely lived to make the same mistake twice. His consigliere, Marco Bianchi, 60 years old with calculating eyes that had witnessed decades of family business, nodded respectfully. "Don Moretti, we were discussing the situation with the Calabrese territory." Vittorio unbuttoned his jacket and took his seat at the head of the table. 2 bodyguards positioned themselves by the door, their suit jackets unable to fully conceal the weapons beneath. They were a necessary precaution in times like these, with tensions between the 5 families escalating daily. "The Calabrese need to understand their place," Vittorio replied, accepting a glass of 18-year-old Macallan from a nervous waiter. "Their recent expansion attempts are unacceptable." Everyone present understood what those expansion attempts entailed. 3 of Vittorio's businesses approached with threats. One of his most loyal capos found in the Hudson with a Sicilian message left for the Moretti family. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees as Vittorio's dark eyes scanned the faces around him. "Franco," he addressed a broad-shouldered man at the far end, "I want you to arrange a meeting with their underboss. Remind him of our arrangement." Franco nodded, understanding the implication. No explicit instructions needed to be given. In their world, problems were solved permanently, and discussions happened behind closed doors. The consequences of those discussions often made the morning papers, though never with any connection to the Moretti family. "Now," Vittorio continued, setting down his tumbler, "I believe we have more pressing matters. The DeLuca situation." The mention of the DeLuca family, Chicago interlopers attempting to establish a foothold in New York, caused a ripple of tension around the table. Their underboss had been making overtures to several key business owners in Moretti territory. "They're getting bold," Marco observed. 2 restaurants on Mulberry Street received visits yesterday. They're offering protection at half our rates. Vittorio's expression remained impassive, but those who knew him well could see the dangerous glint in his eyes. An introductory offer, then, one that would bankrupt them unless they planned to eliminate the competition. He paused. "Us." The meeting continued with reports from each capo about their territories, tribute collections, and police situations. Vittorio listened carefully, asking occasional questions while making mental calculations. The Moretti empire was vast. Construction companies, waste management, luxury import businesses, high-end restaurants, and countless other ventures that generated millions in both legitimate and underground income. Every detail required his attention. As the meeting concluded, Vittorio stood. "I have dinner with Judge Harrington tonight. Marco, you'll join me. The rest of you know your assignments." The men rose respectfully, none daring to turn their backs on the boss as they filed out. Only when the last capo had left did Vittorio allow his shoulders to relax slightly. He checked his Patek Philippe watch, a $120,000 timepiece that had been his father's, and noted he had 2 hours before meeting the judge, who had been instrumental in dismissing cases against 3 of his captains last month. "Sir," his personal driver and security chief, Antonio, appeared at the door. "Your car is ready. Did you still want to stop at Rossi's before your dinner?" Vittorio nodded. Giovanni Rossi was one of the few remaining old-world tailors in the city, and Vittorio had commissioned a new suit for his sister's wedding next month. Family obligations never waited, even during power struggles between criminal empires. The black Mercedes S-Class glided through Manhattan traffic, its heavily tinted windows concealing the three men inside, Vittorio in the back, Antonio driving, and Salvatore, another bodyguard, in the passenger seat. The car's customized interior featured Italian leather and bulletproof glass, a necessary precaution for a man of Vittorio's stature. Rossi's fine tailoring occupied a narrow storefront on a tree-lined street in Little Italy. As they pulled up, Antonio scanned the area before opening Vittorio's door. The ritual was familiar. First Antonio would exit, then signal Salvatore, who would escort Vittorio inside. No matter how mundane the errand, the boss never moved without protection. The bell above the door chimed as they entered the small, elegant shop. Giovanni Rossi, a diminutive 70-year-old with hands still steady enough for the most delicate stitches, rushed forward. Don Moretti, an honor as always. He bowed slightly, old-world manners never forgotten. Your suit is ready for the final fitting. As Vittorio followed the tailor to the back room, a young woman emerged from behind a curtain, arms full of fabric swatches. She nearly collided with Salvatore, who instinctively moved his hand inside his jacket. "Perdonami," she exclaimed, taking a quick step back. She couldn't have been more than 25, with caramel skin and dark hair, pulled back in a professional knot. Her eyes widened at the sight of the imposing men. Giovanni hurried back, flustered. "My apologies, Don Moretti. This is Miss Vega, my new assistant. Isabella, please be careful. This is a very important client." The young woman composed herself quickly, switching to perfect, unaccented English. "I'm so sorry for the interruption, sir. Please excuse me." Vittorio found himself studying her with unexpected interest. She was beautiful, yes, but it was the composed intelligence in her eyes that caught his attention. He waved Salvatore back with a subtle gesture. "No harm done, Miss Vega." His voice was softer than usual, curiosity temporarily displacing his customary guardedness. "Isabella is a miracle worker," Giovanni explained proudly. "She speaks 10 languages: English, Italian, Spanish, Russian, Mandarin, French, Arabic, Portuguese, Japanese, and German. She's helping me with my international clients." Vittorio raised an eyebrow, skeptical. 10 languages? That's quite an accomplishment for someone so young. A small, confident smile touched Isabella's lips. "Si dice che un uomo che parla molte lingue vale molti uomini." Her Italian was flawless, the old saying that a man who speaks many languages is worth many men, delivered with perfect Sicilian intonation. Vittorio nodded, impressed despite himself. "And do you find that to be true, Miss Vega?" he asked, still in English. She met his gaze directly, something few people dared to do. "I believe understanding different languages gives insight into how people think. Sometimes what's not said is more important than what is." There was something almost challenging in her tone that made Vittorio's interest sharpen. People didn't challenge him, not even subtly. Before he could respond, she added something that made his blood freeze. "La famiglia è tutto, il sangue non è acqua," she said quietly in Italian. Vittorio felt his entire body go rigid. The phrase, "family is everything, blood is not water," was not just any Italian saying. It was part of the sacred oath taken by made men in the Moretti family, passed down through generations. Not something any tailor's assistant should know, let alone casually recite to the boss himself. Giovanni, oblivious to the significance, beamed with pride. "See? Perfect accent, too. Isabella, please bring the blue silk samples to the fitting room while I attend to Don Moretti." As she turned away, Vittorio caught her eye once more. Something unspoken passed between them. She knew he had recognized the phrase's significance. Instead of fear, he saw only a calm acknowledgement in her expression before she disappeared behind the curtain. "Antonio," Vittorio said quietly, "find out everything about Miss Isabella Vega. Everything." His security chief nodded, already reaching for his phone. Vittorio followed Giovanni to the fitting room, his mind racing. How did this woman know the sacred words of his family? Was she planted here by the De Lucas, the Calabresi, or was this something else entirely? For the first time in years, Don Vittorio Moretti, feared leader of the most powerful crime family in New York, felt genuinely unsettled. As he mechanically followed the tailor's instructions to turn and extend his arms, his thoughts remained fixed on the mysterious woman and the impossible knowledge she possessed. Knowledge that, in his world, could get someone killed. As he left the shop 20 minutes later, he glanced back through the window. Isabella Vega stood at the counter, organizing fabric swatches. Sensing his gaze, she looked up and met his eyes directly. No fear, no deference, just calm assessment. In that moment, Vittorio knew with absolute certainty their paths would cross again. And when they did, he would have answers, one way or another. 3 days after the encounter at Rossi's, Vittorio sat in his office at the Moretti Group headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. From the outside, the Moretti Group appeared to be nothing more than a successful real estate and investment firm. The 43rd floor office, with its panoramic views of the city, served as the legitimate face of an empire built in shadows. Antonio entered without knocking, the only person permitted such familiarity, and placed a manila folder on the glass desk. "Everything we could find on Isabella Vega," he said, his expression grim. "It's unusual." Vittorio opened the folder, scanning the contents with practiced efficiency. Isabella Maria Vega, 25 years old, born in Miami to a Cuban mother and Colombian father. Graduated summa cum laude from Columbia with degrees in linguistics and international relations. Masters from Georgetown in global security studies. Fluent in 10 languages as claimed. Former intern at the UN. No criminal record, not even a parking ticket. "This doesn't explain how she knows our family oath," Vittorio said, tapping the page with a manicured finger. "Keep digging. Family connections, social media, everything." Antonio shifted uncomfortably. "There's more, boss. She lives in the building owned by Judge Harrington, the same Judge Harrington you had dinner with Tuesday night." Vittorio's eyes narrowed. Coincidences didn't exist in his world. Is she connected to him? Unclear. But there's something else. Antonio hesitated. "She made a phone call after you left Rossi's. To this number." He pointed to a line in the report. Vittorio recognized the area code immediately. Chicago, De Luca territory. "I want surveillance on her 24/7, he ordered, closing the folder, "and get me an address for that number." "Already done," Antonio replied. "It belongs to a Professor Michael Conti at the University of Chicago, Linguistics Department." Vittorio leaned back in his chair. "Conti. Any relation to the Conti family?" He referred to a minor crime family that had been absorbed by the De Lucas a decade ago. "Unknown. We're investigating." A notification chimed on Vittorio's phone. The security system at his penthouse had been triggered. He glanced at the screen, surprised to see Giovanni Rossi's name on the visitor log. "The tailor is at my apartment," he said, rising, "with Miss Vega." Antonio's hand moved instinctively to his weapon. It could be a setup. "Or an opportunity," Vittorio countered. "Call the security team. Have them detained in the lobby until we arrive." 20 minutes later, Vittorio stepped out of the elevator into the private lobby of his Central Park West penthouse. 2 of his security men stood flanking Giovanni and Isabella. The elderly tailor looked terrified. Isabella appeared perfectly composed. "Don Moretti," Giovanni stammered, "please forgive this intrusion. You mentioned yesterday that you needed your suit before Saturday, but you left your backup key at the shop. Miss Vega insisted we deliver it personally." Vittorio's eyes moved to Isabella, who held a garment bag draped carefully over her arm. She met his gaze steadily. "That was thoughtful," he said carefully. "Antonio, please escort Mr. Rossi back to his shop. Miss Vega can bring the suit up." Giovanni began to protest but fell silent under Vittorio's steady gaze. Antonio led the old man to the elevator, leaving Isabella with Vittorio and one remaining security guard. "You're either very brave or very foolish, Miss Vega," Vittorio said once the elevator doors closed. "I needed to speak with you privately," she replied, her voice steady. This seemed the most efficient way. Vittorio gestured to his guard. "Leave us." When the man hesitated, Vittorio added, "Just outside the door." Once alone, Vittorio turned to the woman who had occupied his thoughts for days. "You know who I am." It wasn't a question. Isabella nodded, placing the garment bag carefully over a chair. "I know exactly who you are. Don Vittorio Moretti, head of the Moretti crime family, third-generation leader of one of the 5 families of New York, a man who controls half of Manhattan through both legitimate and illegitimate businesses." Vittorio's expression remained impassive, though inwardly he felt a spark of anger at her bluntness. "And you decided to walk into my home with this knowledge? Do you have a death wish, Miss Vega?" "La verità ti renderà libero, ma prima ti farà incazzare," she replied in flawless Italian. "The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. You seem intent on testing my patience with these little demonstrations," he said coldly. "How do you know the sacred oath of my family?" Isabella took a deep breath. "Because my grandfather taught it to me. His name was Angelo Vega. Before that, it was Angelo Visconti." The name hit Vittorio like a physical blow. Visconti. His father's consigliere until 25 years ago, when he disappeared after a suspected betrayal. The family had searched for years, believing he had defected to a rival organization, a blood debt that had never been settled. "Angelo Visconti is dead," Vittorio said, flatly. "If he weren't, he would be a dead man walking." "He died 3 weeks ago," Isabella replied calmly. "Cancer. On his deathbed, he told me everything, about his life with the Moretti family, about why he left, about the evidence he kept hidden for 25 years. Vittorio moved with the fluid speed that had surprised enemies throughout his rise to power. In one motion, he crossed the room and gripped Isabella's throat, not squeezing but establishing dominance through proximity and the implied threat. "You come to my home speaking of traitors and evidence?" he hissed, his face inches from hers. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't have you join your grandfather right now." To his surprise, she didn't flinch. Her pulse raced beneath his fingers, but her eyes remained steady. "Because the evidence proves your father was murdered by someone in your organization," she said quietly. "The same person who framed my grandfather for betrayal. The same person who's working with the DeLucas to destroy you now." Vittorio's grip loosened slightly, genuine shock breaking through his controlled facade. His father's death had officially been a heart attack, sudden but natural. The family patriarch had passed in his sleep 15 years ago, leaving 20-year-old Vittorio to take control with his uncle's guidance until he came of age. "You're lying," he said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Your father discovered a traitor in the organization," Isabella continued. "He confided in my grandfather, his most trusted advisor. Before they could act, your father was poisoned, and my grandfather was framed as the traitor. He fled with his family, changed their name, and kept the evidence hidden to protect my mother and me." Vittorio released her and stepped back, mind racing. "What evidence?" "Records of payments, names, dates, recordings your father made before his death. Everything needed to identify who really betrayed the Moretti family and who's been working against you from the inside ever since." "And where is this evidence now?" Vittorio asked, his voice dangerously soft. "Somewhere safe," Isabella replied. "It's my only insurance. If anything happens to me, it goes to the FBI, the DeLucas, and every news organization in New York." Vittorio laughed without humor. "You threaten me in my own home? You're either extremely confident or completely insane." "I'm not threatening you, Don Moretti. I'm offering you the truth about your father's murder and the chance to find the real traitor. My grandfather's dying wish was to clear his name and repay his debt to your father. I'm here to fulfill that obligation." For several long moments, Vittorio studied her. Everything in his experience told him this was an elaborate trap. Yet something in her unwavering gaze suggested honesty or an exceptional ability to lie. "Why should I believe anything you say?" he finally asked. "Il leone non si volta quando il cane abbaia," she replied softly. "The lion doesn't turn around when the dog barks." It was his father's favorite saying, one he had used often with Vittorio as a boy. Not a common phrase, not something she could have guessed. Before he could respond, his phone rang. Antonio's ringtone. Keeping his eyes on Isabella, he answered, "What?" "Boss, we have a situation. The DeLuca underboss was spotted at Enzo's restaurant. 4 of our soldiers confronted him. It's getting ugly." Enzo's was one of Vittorio's favorite establishments, less than 10 blocks away. This was a deliberate provocation. DeLuca men on Moretti territory, at a place known to be under the boss's personal protection. "Handle it," Vittorio ordered. "No public scenes. Take him somewhere quiet if necessary." "There's more," Antonio continued. "Judge Harrington was found dead in his apartment an hour ago. Apparent suicide." Vittorio's eyes flicked to Isabella. "I'll call you back," he said, ending the call. "The judge is dead," he told her flatly, watching for her reaction. If she was surprised, she hid it well. "That's why I came today. I received a warning from one of my grandfather's old contacts. The judge's death was ordered by the same person who killed your father. My name is next on the list." "Why would they target you now after all these years?" "Because I accessed my grandfather's safety deposit box last week," she explained. "Someone has been watching. They know I have the evidence." Vittorio paced the room, mind working furiously. If she was telling the truth, there was a traitor close to him. Someone who had been in his organization for decades. Someone who had killed his father and was now working with the DeLucas. If she was lying, this could be an elaborate setup to get close to him during a vulnerable time. Either way, he needed to keep her close. "You'll stay here," he decided abruptly. Isabella blinked. "Excuse me? If someone is trying to kill you for this evidence, you're safer under my protection. If you're lying to me—" He let the implication hang in the air. "I'm not going to be your prisoner," she protested. "You lost the right to negotiate when you walked into my home with accusations about my father's death," Vittorio replied coldly. "You'll stay here where my men can watch you until I determine if you're telling the truth." He pressed a button on his phone. "Antonio, we have a guest who will be staying in the South Suite. Arrange appropriate security." Isabella crossed her arms. "And if I refuse?" Vittorio stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Let me be clear, Miss Vega. You've presented yourself as either an invaluable ally or a dangerous enemy. Until I know which, you don't leave my sight. Consider it protection or captivity. The choice of perspective is yours, but the reality remains the same." For the first time, a flash of fear crossed her face, quickly replaced by determination. "I'll need my things from my apartment. Write a list. My people will collect them." Antonio entered, eyebrows raising slightly at the tension in the room. "Show Miss Vega to the South Suite," Vittorio ordered. "She'll be staying with us indefinitely." As Antonio led her away, Isabella paused at the door. "Your father once told my grandfather that his greatest fear wasn't death, but that his son would inherit his position without knowing who he could truly trust." Her eyes held Vittorio's. He was right to be afraid. After she left, Vittorio poured himself 3 fingers of scotch and moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city spread before him, a kingdom he controlled through fear and loyalty, power and money. Somewhere in that concrete labyrinth was either the truth about his father's death or an elaborate trap closing around him. For the first time in years, Don Vittorio Moretti felt the cold touch of uncertainty. The woman down the hall had shattered his carefully constructed world with a few sentences in perfect Italian, and nothing would be the same again. 3 days passed with Isabella effectively under house arrest in Vittorio's penthouse. The South Suite, a luxurious guest apartment with its own sitting room, bedroom, and bathroom, became her gilded cage. Armed guards monitored the elevator and exits. Her phone and laptop had been confiscated, though she'd been permitted to keep her books and clothing. For his part, Vittorio kept his distance, having Antonio and his team investigate her claims while he dealt with the escalating situation with the De Lucas. The confrontation at Enzo's restaurant had been contained, but tensions throughout the city were reaching a breaking point. Reports from Vittorio's captains suggested the De Lucas were consolidating their power, preparing for something big. On the 4th morning, Vittorio entered the suite without knocking. Isabella sat by the window, a book open in her lap. She wore simple black pants and a cream silk blouse, items his men had collected from her apartment. Her dark hair fell loose around her shoulders, softer than the severe style she'd worn at Rossi's. "Have you verified my story yet?" she asked without preamble. "Partially," he replied, taking a seat across from her. "Angelo Visconti did change his name to Vega. He did move to Miami with a young daughter, your mother. He did work as my father's consigliere until his disappearance 25 years ago. And nothing you've told me proves he didn't betray my father," Vittorio said flatly. "It doesn't explain how your grandfather knew my father was murdered when his death was ruled natural causes." Isabella closed her book carefully. "Because my grandfather helped cover it up. Your uncle, Salvatore Moretti, convinced him it was necessary to prevent a war. He said if word got out that Don Moretti had been assassinated, the other families would have seen it as weakness and moved against you all." Vittorio's eyes narrowed. His uncle Salvatore had served as acting boss until Vittorio turned 25, then stepped back to consigliere. He'd been like a father to Vittorio after his real father's death. "You expect me to believe my uncle covered up my father's murder? The same uncle who taught me everything, who protected our family's interests until I was ready to lead?" "I expect you to consider the possibility," Isabella replied evenly. "Who benefited most from your father's death and my grandfather's disappearance? Who took control of the Moretti family afterward?" "Careful," Vittorio warned, his voice deadly quiet. "You're accusing the man who raised me." Isabella leaned forward. "I'm telling you what my grandfather told me. Check the records. After your father died and my grandfather disappeared, your uncle consolidated power. Captains loyal to your father were reassigned or found dead. Family traditions changed. Territory was conceded to other families, particularly the De Lucas." The accusation struck uncomfortably close to memories Vittorio had long suppressed. There had been changes after his father's death, shifts in allegiances, subtle alterations to how business was conducted. At 20, grieving and struggling to prove himself worthy, he hadn't questioned his uncle's guidance. "If my uncle wanted control, why relinquish it to me when I came of age?" Vittorio challenged. "He could have eliminated me at any time." "Because the Moretti name matters. The family follows the bloodline. Your soldiers are loyal to you because you're your father's son. Your uncle needs you as the figurehead while he makes the real decisions." Vittorio stood abruptly, pacing the room. "This is absurd. You bring me nothing but accusations and convenient stories from a dead traitor." "Then let me show you the evidence," Isabella said calmly. "Take me to where my grandfather stored it." "So you can lead me into an ambush?" "I don't think so." Isabella rose to face him. Despite being nearly a foot shorter, she showed no intimidation. "If I wanted you dead, I wouldn't have come to you with this information. I would have taken it straight to your enemies or the authorities." "Perhaps your plan is more elaborate," Vittorio suggested. "Gain my trust, get close, strike when I'm vulnerable." "And how exactly would I accomplish that?" she challenged. "I'm a linguistics expert, not an assassin. You have men watching me constantly. You've taken my phone, isolated me from everyone. What threat could I possibly pose to the great Don Moretti?" There was something in her defiance that stirred something in Vittorio, something beyond suspicion or anger. Few people dared speak to him this way. The fact that she did, knowing exactly who he was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Before he could respond, a commotion sounded from the hallway. Antonio burst through the door, his expression grave. "Boss, we have a situation. Someone hit Franco's club downtown. 6 of our men are down." Vittorio's expression hardened instantly. DeLucas? Unknown. Professional hit. They knew exactly when delivery was happening. The implication was clear. Only those in Vittorio's inner circle knew the schedule for deliveries of certain goods at Franco's club. High-end liquor on paper, much more valuable items in reality. "Lock down all operations," Vittorio ordered. "Call an emergency meeting of the capos at the warehouse. 1 hour." Antonio nodded, then hesitated, glancing at Isabella. "What about her?" Vittorio considered for a moment. "She comes with us. I'm not leaving her unattended, and I need all security personnel." "That's not advisable," Antonio began. "It wasn't a suggestion." Vittorio cut him off. Turning to Isabella, he added, "One wrong move, one word I don't like, and you'll wish you never heard the name Moretti. Understood?" She nodded, something like relief crossing her features. After days confined to the suite, even a dangerous outing was preferable to continued isolation. 30 minutes later, they were in Vittorio's armored Bentley, part of a 3-car convoy heading toward Brooklyn. Isabella sat beside Vittorio in the back seat, Antonio driving with another guard in the passenger seat. "This is what my grandfather warned about," Isabella said quietly, so only Vittorio could hear. "The information leaks, the coordinated attacks. It's been happening for years, but escalating recently." Vittorio gave her a sideways glance. "And why would that be?" "Because your uncle is finally ready to make his move," she replied. "He's been working with the DeLucas to weaken your position from the inside. The attack today is just the beginning." Before Vittorio could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Marco, his current consigliere. "Marco," he answered. "Are you at the warehouse?" "Don Moretti." Marco's voice was tense. "Don't come to the warehouse, it's a setup. I just got word." The line went dead as the first impact hit. A black SUV slammed into the lead car of their convoy, sending it spinning across the road. Another vehicle rammed them from behind, the armored Bentley absorbing the impact but still lurching forward violently. "Ambush!" Antonio shouted, drawing his weapon and accelerating to break free from the attacking vehicles. Gunfire erupted, bullets pinging harmlessly off the bulletproof glass. Vittorio pushed Isabella down below window level, his own weapon already in hand. "Call for backup," he ordered Antonio, who was maneuvering the heavy vehicle with remarkable skill, trying to break free from their attackers. The third car in their convoy returned fire, creating enough distraction for Antonio to swerve down a side street. The pursuing vehicles followed, one pulling alongside as the gunmen aimed at their tires, the vulnerable point of even armored vehicles. "Hold on," Antonio warned before executing a sharp turn that sent their attacker crashing into a parked delivery truck. Isabella clung to the door handle, eyes wide but remarkably composed given the circumstances. The remaining pursuing vehicle was gaining ground when Antonio made another turn, this time into a narrow alley barely wide enough for the Bentley. "Where are you going?" Vittorio demanded. "Safe house on Kent Avenue," Antonio replied, navigating the tight space. "It's our best option." They emerged from the alley onto a quieter street. The pursuing vehicle momentarily lost. Antonio maintained speed, weaving through the Brooklyn streets toward the waterfront district where the Moretti family maintained several properties, including a secure safe house used only in emergencies. "Who knew about the meeting?" Vittorio asked, his voice deadly calm despite the attack. "Only the capos and your uncle," Antonio replied, checking mirrors constantly for signs of pursuit. And now we know who's behind it, Isabella said quietly. Vittorio's expression revealed nothing, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped his phone, attempting to call his uncle. No answer. 10 minutes later, they pulled into an underground garage beneath a nondescript industrial building. 2 guards appeared immediately, weapons ready until they recognized the vehicle. "Secure the perimeter," Antonio ordered as they exited the car. "No one enters or leaves without direct authorization from Don Moretti, and find out what happened to our 3rd vehicle." The safe house occupied the top floor of the converted warehouse, a luxurious apartment with reinforced walls, security systems, and escape routes. As they entered, Vittorio immediately moved to the communications center, attempting to contact his captains while Antonio coordinated with security. Isabella stood awkwardly in the center of the room, suddenly an outsider in this efficient machine of criminal crisis management. After a moment, Vittorio glanced up at her. "Sit," he ordered, gesturing to a leather sofa. "This doesn't mean I believe you." She complied, watching as he made call after call, his expression growing darker with each conversation. After 20 minutes, he approached her, sitting heavily in the chair opposite. "Franco is dead," he said flatly. "Marco is missing. 3 of my capos didn't show up at the warehouse, and the ones who did walked into an ambush. 6 more men dead." "I'm sorry," Isabella said quietly, and seemed to genuinely mean it. "My uncle is unreachable," Vittorio continued, studying her reaction. "Convenient timing for your accusations." "Or confirmation of them," she countered. "This wasn't just an attack, it was a coordinated purge. Only someone with intimate knowledge of your organization could have orchestrated it." Vittorio leaned back, fatigue briefly showing through his controlled exterior. "You keep talking about evidence. If your grandfather had proof of my uncle's betrayal, why didn't he use it 25 years ago?" Isabella's expression softened. "Because he was thinking of you. You were just a boy. He didn't want you to lose both your father and uncle in one blow. And later, when you were older, he feared you, wouldn't believe him, that you'd be too loyal to the man who raised you. And now? Now he's dead, and his dying wish was for me to deliver the truth and clear his name. The evidence exists, Don Moretti. Financial records showing your uncle receiving payments from the DeLucas for years. Recordings of your father discussing the betrayal he'd discovered before his death. Documentation of how your uncle systematically eliminated everyone loyal to your father." Vittorio was silent for a long moment, weighing his options. Trust was a luxury in his world, and Isabella Vega was still an unknown variable. Yet the day's events lent credibility to her claims. Someone close to him had orchestrated the attacks, someone with intimate knowledge of his operations. "Where is this evidence?" he finally asked. "In a safe deposit box at First National Bank in Manhattan," she replied, "under the name Maria Conti. The Chicago professor you called." Isabella didn't seem surprised he knew about the call. "My mother's cousin. He's a linguistics expert, the only family connection I maintained that my grandfather approved of. I called him to let him know I was following through on my grandfather's wishes." Vittorio studied her carefully. "Tomorrow morning, we'll visit this bank. If you're lying to me—" "I'm not," she said simply. Antonio appeared at Vittorio's side. "Boss, we have confirmation that your uncle is alive. He's called an emergency meeting of the commission, all 5 families. He's claiming you've been compromised." The commission, the governing body of the major crime families, met only during times of serious conflict or succession issues. For Vittorio's uncle to call such a meeting was effectively a declaration of war against his own nephew. "When?" Vittorio demanded. "Tomorrow night. The old location on Staten Island." Vittorio's jaw tightened. "He's making his move, consolidating support from the other families before he comes for me directly." "If you go to that meeting, you won't leave alive," Isabella said softly. This is exactly how my grandfather described your father's last days, isolated with support stripped away before the final betrayal. For a moment, vulnerability flashed across Vittorio's features, a glimpse of the boy who had lost his father, who had trusted his uncle, who had shouldered the weight of the Moretti legacy far too young. Then his expression hardened once more into the impassive mask of the boss. "Get some rest," he told Isabella, standing. "Tomorrow we retrieve your evidence, and then I'll decide whether your grandfather's debt to my father has been repaid, or if the Vega family will join the Visconti name in extinction." He turned away, but Isabella caught his arm. A gesture so unexpected and intimate that Vittorio's bodyguards tensed, hands moving to weapons. With a slight gesture, Vittorio waved them off. "What?" he asked, looking down at where her fingers gripped the fine material of his suit. "You asked." "Why you should believe me," she said, her voice low and intense. "Because I could have taken this evidence to the FBI for witness protection. I could have sold it to the DeLucas or the Calabrese for a fortune. Instead, I came to you, knowing exactly how dangerous you are, because my grandfather believed the son of Antonio Moretti deserved to know the truth." Their eyes held for a long moment. Vittorio was accustomed to seeing fear when people looked at him, fear thinly disguised as respect or deference. In Isabella's eyes, he saw neither. Instead, there was determination, intelligence, and something else he couldn't quite name. "We'll see what truth the morning brings," he said finally, gently removing her hand from his arm. As he walked away, Vittorio felt a strange certainty forming in his mind. Tomorrow would change everything. Either Isabella Vega would prove to be his salvation, revealing a betrayal decades in the making, or she would be eliminated as an enemy of the Moretti family. There would be no middle ground, no space for uncertainty in the dangerous world he commanded. What troubled him most, as he stared out at the Brooklyn skyline from the safe house window, was the realization that for the first time in years, the prospect of someone's death brought him no satisfaction, only a hollow ache he couldn't explain and didn't want to examine. Dawn broke over New York City as Vittorio stood at the safe house window, watching the early light transform the Brooklyn waterfront. He hadn't slept. The events of the previous day, the ambush, the deaths of his men, his uncle's betrayal, had left him in a state of cold calculation, mentally reconstructing his power structure, identifying weaknesses, planning countermoves. Behind him, Isabella emerged from the guest bedroom, dressed in the same clothes as yesterday, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked surprisingly composed for someone caught in a Mafia war. "You should have run," Vittorio said without turning. "When the ambush happened, you could have escaped in the chaos." "To where?" she asked simply. "If your uncle wins this war, I'm as dead as you are. He knows I have the evidence." Antonio entered with 2 other guards, all armed and vigilant. "Boss, we've secured a route to Manhattan. The bank opens at 9. Vittorio nodded, finally turning from the window. "Any word from Marco?" "Still missing, but we found 3 of our capos. They're loyal to you, waiting for instructions. Have them secure our most important properties: the club, the restaurant in Little Italy, the warehouse in Queens. I want trusted men only, no one connected to my uncle." As Antonio left to make arrangements, Vittorio approached Isabella. "If this is an elaborate trap, today is when it springs. You understand what that means for you." She met his gaze steadily. "I understand perfectly, but it's not a trap." Something in her unwavering confidence gave him pause. In his world of shifting loyalties and calculated betrayals, her conviction seemed almost out of place, a fixed point amid chaos. 90 minutes later, they pulled up 2 blocks from First National Bank, having switched vehicles twice to ensure they weren't followed. Vittorio wore a tailored gray suit that concealed his weapon, while Isabella had been given a simple black dress from the safe house supplies. "2 of my men will accompany us," Vittorio instructed as they prepared to enter the bank. When we reach the vault, you'll open the box with me present. Isabella nodded, showing no hesitation. As they entered the bank's ornate lobby, Vittorio scanned for threats, a lifetime habit that had kept him alive through numerous attempts on his life. Nothing seemed amiss as they approached the customer service desk. "I need access to my safe deposit box," Isabella told the representative, Maria Conti. The woman checked her computer. "Of course, Ms. Conti. May I see your ID and key?" Isabella produced both from her purse, items Antonio had retrieved from her apartment days earlier. After verification, they were escorted to the vault area, Vittorio and one guard accompanying her, while the second man remained in the lobby. The bank employee opened the outer lock, then stepped aside. "Just press the button when you're finished." Once alone in the viewing room, Isabella inserted her key into the box and pulled out a weathered leather portfolio. Her hands trembled slightly, the first sign of nervousness Vittorio had seen from her. "Open it," he ordered. Inside were neatly organized documents, USB drives, and what appeared to be old microcassette tapes. Isabella handed him a manila envelope from the top of the stack. "These are the financial records first. Transfers from DeLuca accounts to offshore entities controlled by your uncle, dating back 25 years. Vittorio examined the papers, his expression darkening as he recognized account numbers and transaction codes. These were authentic Moretti family financial records, documents only someone with insider access could have obtained. "This proves nothing except that my grandfather was a thief when he disappeared," Vittorio said, though his voice lacked conviction. Without arguing, Isabella handed him a small digital recorder. "This is more compelling. My grandfather transferred the original recordings your father made to digital format before he died." Vittorio took the device, pressing play with reluctance. After a moment of static, a voice emerged, a voice he hadn't heard in 15 years but recognized instantly, his father. "September 12th, 1998. I've confirmed Salvatore's betrayal. The DeLuca money, the sabotage shipments, the information leaks, it all traces back to my own brother. Marco suspects nothing. The only man I can trust now is Angelo. Tomorrow we move against Salvatore, but if anything happens to me, Angelo has instructions. Vittorio must be protected until he's ready to take his rightful place." Vittorio's hand tightened around the recorder, his knuckles white. The date was 3 days before his father's heart attack. He started to speak but stopped as the recording continued. "Angelo, if you're listening to this, it means I'm gone. Protect my son. Salvatore will try to control him, to shape him into a puppet he can manipulate. The evidence is in the Manhattan apartment, behind the painting in my study. Don't confront Salvatore directly. He has too many loyal men. Wait until Vittorio is older, strong enough to reclaim what's his, our family, our legacy. Ti voglio bene, figlio mio." The last words, "I love you, my son," hit Vittorio like a physical blow. He turned away, gripping the edge of the table as years of carefully constructed certainty crumbled around him. "There's more," Isabella said quietly, giving him a moment to compose himself. "Documents detailing how your uncle realigned the family structure after your father's death, correspondence with the DeLucas dating back decades, everything my grandfather saved to fulfill his promise to your father." Vittorio straightened, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Why didn't your grandfather come to me when I took control at 25? Why wait all these years?" "Fear," Isabella answered simply. "Fear that you wouldn't believe him against the uncle who raised you. Fear that Salvatore's men would kill him and his family before he could convince you, and later, illness. Cancer took years to claim him, but it made him cautious, patient. He wanted to be certain the evidence would reach you intact." "Through you," Vittorio observed, studying her with new intensity. "He sent his granddaughter into a war zone." A sad smile touched Isabella's lips. "I volunteered. My grandfather taught me everything about your world from the time I was old enough to understand. The languages, the codes, the history of the families. When he knew he was dying, I promised to complete his mission. At the risk of your own life. Family obligations transcend personal safety, she replied with a simple dignity that resonated with Vittorio's own deeply held beliefs. You of all people should understand that. Before he could respond, his phone vibrated, a text from Antonio in the lobby. Uncle's men outside, at least 6. Need to move now. Vittorio's mind shifted instantly to tactical planning. We have company. My uncle's found us. Isabella quickly repacked the portfolio. There's a service entrance through the vault area. My grandfather made me memorize the bank's layout. Of course he did, Vittorio said with grim appreciation. To his guard, he ordered, Tell Antonio to create a diversion. We're going out the back. As they moved through the vault area toward a staff door, the sound of commotion reached them from the lobby. Gunshots would bring police, something even warring Mafia factions tried to avoid, but Vittorio knew his uncle's men would have other means of stopping them. They emerged into a narrow hallway lined with offices. A startled bank employee looked up from her desk as they passed, too surprised to raise an alarm. At the end of the corridor, a service door led to a back alley where deliveries were received. My car is 2 blocks north, Vittorio said as they exited into the alley. Stay close. They moved quickly but calmly, avoiding attention as they navigated the morning crowds of lower Manhattan. Isabella clutched the portfolio containing 25 years of evidence against her chest, while Vittorio scanned constantly for threats. They were halfway to the car when Vittorio spotted 2 men approaching from the next intersection. The unmistakable look of soldiers on a mission, hands concealed in jacket pockets where weapons waited. Cross the street, he murmured to Isabella, guiding her with a hand at the small of her back. Don't run. Don't look at them. As they stepped onto the opposite sidewalk, one of the men spoke into his wrist, communicating their position to others. The net was closing. They've seen us, Vittorio said calmly. When I say run, head into that department store ahead. Find the loading dock and exit on the far side. Isabella nodded, her breathing controlled despite the danger. What about you? I'll be right behind you. The evidence is what matters now. The men were moving more purposefully now, angling to intercept them. One reached into his jacket. Run, Vittorio commanded. Isabella sprinted toward the store entrance, clutching the portfolio. Vittorio drew his weapon, keeping it low against his leg as he backed toward the store, creating a barrier between Isabella and their pursuers. One of the men raised his gun, a rookie mistake in broad daylight on a Manhattan street. Before he could fire, Vittorio put 2 bullets in his chest. The second man dove for cover as pedestrians screamed and scattered. Inside the department store, chaos erupted as shoppers reacted to the gunshots outside. Vittorio found Isabella waiting just inside the entrance, her face pale but composed. This way, she said, navigating confidently through the store toward the back. Years of linguistic training had given her an almost photographic memory for layouts and spatial relationships, a skill now proving unexpectedly valuable. They reached the loading dock just as alarms began to sound throughout the building. Employees looked up in confusion as Vittorio and Isabella pushed through the double doors onto a busy service road behind the building. My safe house in Tribeca is 10 minutes from here, Vittorio said, pulling out his phone to call for extraction. Before he could dial, the device buzzed with an incoming call, a number he recognized as belonging to his consigliere, Marco. Where are you? Vittorio demanded upon answering. Don Moretti. Marco's voice was strained. Don't trust anyone. Your uncle has called in favors from all 5 families. They're hunting you across the city. Marco, I need extraction. Lower. Manhattan, near... No time, Marco interrupted. Listen carefully. Your uncle has taken your sister Maria. He's holding her at the old distillery in Red Hook. He's using her as bait to draw you out. Vittorio felt ice form in his veins. Maria, his younger sister. the only family member he truly trusted, scheduled to be married in 3 weeks. She lived in Boston, deliberately distant from family business, protected by Vittorio's best men. If he's hurt her, she's alive for now. But he's desperate. The commission meeting tonight. He needs you eliminated before then to secure their support. How did you escape the ambush? A pained laugh came through the line. I didn't entirely. I'm at the Queen's Hospital. Your uncle's men don't know yet, but they will soon. You need to move. Vittorio's mind raced, calculating options, risks, potential betrayals. If this is a trap, Marco, after 20 years of loyalty, you still doubt me? The hurt in his consigliere's voice was genuine. Your father saved my life. That debt passes to his son. After ending the call, Vittorio turned to Isabella, who had heard enough to understand the situation. They have your sister, she said softly. It's another manipulation. Manipulation or not, I can't ignore it, Vittorio replied, already formulating a plan. If they hurt Maria, nothing else matters. Not the evidence, not my uncle's betrayal, nothing. It's a trap, Isabella insisted. Exactly what my grandfather warned about. Your uncle knows your weakness. Maria is not a weakness, Vittorio snapped, a rare flash of emotion breaking through his controlled exterior. She's my sister, my family. Nothing is more important. Isabella studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Then we go together. The distillery will be heavily guarded. You'll need help. You've done enough bringing me the evidence. This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment my grandfather sent me to you, she replied firmly. Besides, you need someone your uncle doesn't know, someone who can move freely while all his men are looking for you. Vittorio considered her offer, weighing risks against potential advantages. Finally, he nodded. We need weapons, transportation, and a plan. I have a backup cache 2 blocks from here. As they moved through back streets toward Vittorio's emergency supplies, he found himself in the unfamiliar position of trusting someone outside his organization, someone he'd known for less than a week. Yet Isabella Vega had proven herself repeatedly, risking her life to fulfill a promise made by her grandfather. In Vittorio's world, such loyalty was rarer than any gemstone and infinitely more valuable. The cache, hidden in a storage room above a restaurant owned by a distant Moretti cousin, contained everything they needed: weapons, cash, burner phones, and disguises. As Isabella changed into jeans and a hoodie that would help her blend into the Brooklyn neighborhood around the distillery, Vittorio placed a call to the 3 capos he knew remained loyal. I need men at the old distillery in Red Hook, he instructed. Discreet surveillance only. My uncle has Maria, and I'm going in to get her. While they prepared, Isabella studied a blueprint of the distillery that Vittorio had pulled up on a laptop. Your uncle will expect you to come through the main entrance or the loading bay, she observed. Both are easily defended, limited approaches. There's a maintenance tunnel that connects to the river, Vittorio replied, pointing to a section of the blueprint. Bootlegger's route from the Prohibition era. My father showed it to me when I was a boy. Would your uncle know about it? Vittorio's expression darkened. Possibly. My father might have shown him too. But it's still our best option, Isabella concluded. If we can get inside undetected, we might be able to locate your sister before confronting your uncle. As they finalized their approach, Vittorio found himself studying Isabella with new appreciation. Her analytical mind, linguistic skills, and surprising courage were assets he hadn't expected. In the midst of the worst crisis of his leadership, he'd found an unlikely ally. Why are you really doing this? He asked suddenly. Your grandfather's debt to my father is paid. You delivered the evidence. You could walk away now. Isabella met his gaze directly. Maybe I believe your father was right to trust mine. Maybe I think the son of Antonio Moretti deserves the chance to reclaim what's rightfully his. She paused. Or maybe I've spent my entire life hearing stories about the Moretti family, and I want to see how this one ends." There was something in her eyes that Vittorio couldn't quite define. Determination, certainly, but also a hint of something more personal, more complex. Before he could question her further, his phone buzzed with a message from one of his capos outside the distillery. 6 guards visible, 2 at main entrance, 2 at loading dock, 2 patrolling perimeter. Unknown number inside. Black SUV with Maria arrived 20 minutes ago. "It's confirmed," Vittorio said grimly. "They have my sister. We move in 1 hour when darkness gives us better cover." As they completed preparations, Vittorio found himself at a crossroads unlike any in his life. By nightfall, either he would have reclaimed his family's legacy and rescued his sister, or the Moretti empire his grandfather had built would fall into the hands of a traitor. And Isabella Vega, the woman who had walked into his world with dangerous knowledge and unflinching courage, would share whatever fate awaited him. For the first time in years, Don Vittorio Moretti felt the full weight of his family name and the responsibility that came with it. This night would decide not just his future, but the future of everyone connected to him, by blood, by loyalty, or by the strange twist of fate that had brought Isabella into his life at precisely the moment he needed her most. Darkness settled over the Brooklyn waterfront as Vittorio and Isabella approached the old distillery from the riverside. The abandoned industrial building loomed against the night sky, its brick facade illuminated only by security lights at key entry points. From their position near the water, they could see Salvatore's men patrolling, professional, vigilant, heavily armed. "My men counted 12 guards outside," Vittorio murmured, studying the building through compact binoculars. "At least as many inside, probably more." Isabella nodded, pulling her dark hoodie tighter against the chill coming off the water. "And the tunnel entrance?" "There." Vittorio indicated a maintenance shed near the water's edge. "It looks unguarded, but they may have sensors or cameras we can't see." They waited in silence as a patrol passed nearby, then moved quickly to the shed. The padlock on the door appeared untouched, encouraging, but Vittorio remained cautious as he picked it with practiced efficiency. Inside, beneath layers of debris and forgotten equipment, a trap door led to a narrow brick tunnel, a remnant from the days when bootleggers moved illegal liquor directly from ships to the distillery without prohibition agents noticing. "Your father showed you this?" Isabella whispered as they descended into the damp passage. Vittorio nodded, a rare softness briefly crossing his features. "He said a good leader always keeps an escape route ready. He brought me here when I was 10, made me memorize every turn." The tunnel stretched about 100 yards, barely wide enough for them to walk single file, their way lit only by the narrow beam of a tactical flashlight. Water dripped from the ceiling, and their footsteps echoed despite their efforts at silence. "If your uncle knows about this tunnel, we're walking into an ambush," Isabella observed. "Then we die together," Vittorio replied matter-of-factly. "But I think he's forgotten. Salvatore always preferred the front door. Grand entrances, demonstrations of power. Subtlety was never his strength." At the end of the tunnel, a steep metal ladder led up to another trapdoor. Vittorio paused, listening intently before slowly pushing it open. They emerged into what had once been a storage cellar, now filled with dusty barrels and abandoned equipment. "We're in," he whispered, helping Isabella through the trapdoor. "The main distillery floor is 1 level up. Maria will likely be kept somewhere visible. My uncle will want me to see her immediately when I enter through the main doors. How do we find her without being seen?" "There's a catwalk above the main floor. We can use it to survey the situation before making a move." They moved silently through the cellar to a service stairwell, Vittorio leading with his weapon drawn. Years of dangerous situations had honed his senses. Each creak of the building, each shift in the air registered as potential threat or valuable information. Reaching the catwalk required navigating through a maze of abandoned offices and storage rooms. Twice they froze as guards passed nearby, voices echoing through the cavernous building. Finally, they reached a metal door that Vittorio knew would lead to the overhead walkway. "Wait," Isabella whispered, placing a hand on his arm. "What's our plan once we locate your sister?" "Create a diversion on the opposite side of the building. My men are positioned to assist once we signal. During the chaos, we get to Maria and extract through this same route." Isabella nodded, but her expression remained concerned. "And your uncle?" Vittorio's eyes hardened. "Tonight, family obligations will be settled, permanently." The catwalk provided a perfect vantage point of the main distillery floor. From their concealed position, they could see Salvatore Moretti pacing near the central copper still that dominated the space. Around him, at least 15 armed men maintained positions, a substantial show of force. And there, tied to a chair in the center of the room, was Maria Moretti. Even from a distance, Vittorio could see the fear in his sister's posture, though her head remained high. A Moretti to the core, refusing to show weakness even in captivity. "Is she hurt?" Isabella asked, noting the tension radiating from Vittorio. "Not visibly," he replied, his voice tight with controlled rage. "But Salvatore will pay for every second she's spent in fear." As they watched, Salvatore checked his watch and approached Maria, speaking to her with animated gestures. Though they couldn't hear the words, the threatening nature of the conversation was clear from Maria's recoil. "He's getting impatient," Isabella observed. "The commission meeting is in 3 hours. He needs this resolved before then." Vittorio's phone vibrated silently, a text from his capos outside. "In position, awaiting signal." "We move in 5 minutes," he decided, sending a brief response with instructions. "My men will create a diversion at the main entrance. When Salvatore's guards respond, we drop to the floor, get to Maria, and head back to the tunnel." Isabella nodded, her composure remarkable for someone unaccustomed to combat situations. As Vittorio prepared to move, she caught his arm once more. "Vittorio," she said softly, the first time she'd used his given name. "Whatever happens, your father would be proud of the man you've become. My grandfather always said Antonio Moretti's greatest achievement wasn't his empire, but his son." Something unspoken passed between them, a connection transcending the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. For a brief moment, Vittorio allowed himself to acknowledge the strange trust that had formed, the unexpected alliance that had given him a chance to reclaim his family's honor. The moment was shattered by the sound of gunfire erupting from the main entrance. The diversion had begun. As predicted, most of Salvatore's men rushed toward the sound, weapons drawn, leaving only 4 guards with Maria and Salvatore. "Now," Vittorio ordered, moving swiftly to the catwalk ladder. They descended quickly, using massive distillery equipment as cover, while approaching the central area where Maria was held. Salvatore was shouting orders, clearly frustrated by the unexpected attack. In the chaos, he hadn't noticed the 2 figures moving steadily closer to his position. They were 20 feet away when one of the remaining guards spotted them, raising his weapon with a shout of alarm. Vittorio fired first, dropping the man with a single shot. The sound alerted Salvatore, who spun toward them, his face contorting with shock and rage at the sight of his nephew. "Vittorio!" he snarled, immediately using Maria as a shield, pressing a gun to her temple. "I should have known you'd find a way in. Always the clever one, just like your father." Vittorio advanced slowly, his weapon trained on his uncle. Isabella remained slightly behind him, moving to flank from the right. "It's over, Salvatore," Vittorio said, his voice deadly calm. "I know everything. The betrayal, my father's murder, the deal with the De Lucas, 25 years of lies." Salvatore laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "What exactly do you think you know? Whatever stories this woman has fed you," he gestured toward Isabella with contempt, "they're nothing but the desperate fabrications of a traitor's granddaughter." "I heard my father's recording," Vittorio replied. His own words, naming you as his betrayer 3 days before you had him killed. Something flickered in Salvatore's eyes. Genuine surprise, quickly masked. Impossible. Angelo Visconti had everything. Isabella interrupted. Every record, every transaction, every communication with the De Lucas. My grandfather preserved it all for this moment. Maria's eyes widened at these revelations, her gaze moving between her brother and uncle with growing horror. Despite the gun at her head, she straightened her posture, Moretti pride overcoming fear. Even if what you claim is true, Salvatore said, recovering his composure, it changes nothing. The commission has already turned against you, Vittorio. The other families won't accept Antonio's self-righteous son disrupting profitable arrangements we've maintained for decades. The commission respects strength and legacy above all, Vittorio countered, edging closer. When they learn how you betrayed your own blood, how you murdered your brother to seize power, they'll understand why the Moretti name must be cleansed of your dishonor. Salvatore's expression darkened with genuine anger. You think you understand our world, boy? Your father was weak. His outdated codes of honor, his refusal to evolve with the times, he was leading us to ruin. Everything I've done has been to preserve the Moretti Empire. By selling pieces of it to our enemies? Vittorio's disgust was palpable. By betraying the very principles that built our family's strength? The standoff was interrupted by an explosion from the front of the building. The conflict with Vittorio's men was escalating. Salvatore glanced nervously toward the sound, his grip on Maria momentarily loosening. It was all the opening Vittorio needed. Now! He shouted to Isabella, who instantly threw the metal canister she'd been concealing. The flashbang grenade detonated with blinding light and deafening sound. In the critical seconds of disorientation, Vittorio launched himself toward his sister, tackling her chair sideways and out of Salvatore's grasp as his uncle stumbled backward. Salvatore recovered quickly, firing wildly as Vittorio shielded Maria with his body. One bullet grazed Vittorio's shoulder. Another splintered the wooden chair holding Maria. Isabella, moving with unexpected precision, engaged one of the remaining guards, using a combination of surprise and trained technique to disarm him before Vittorio could reposition for a clear shot. "Get Maria to the tunnel," Vittorio ordered Isabella, turning to face his uncle, as more of Salvatore's men rushed back from the front entrance, drawn by the gunfire. Isabella hesitated only briefly before cutting Maria's bonds with a pocket knife and pulling her toward their escape route. Maria resisted, unwilling to leave her brother. "Vittorio, no!" she cried, understanding his intention to confront Salvatore alone. "Go," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I'll be right behind you." As Isabella pulled Maria toward the service stairwell, Vittorio and Salvatore circled each other. Generations of Moretti power and betrayal concentrated in their confrontation. The arriving guards held their fire, instinctively recognizing the personal nature of the conflict unfolding before them. "You've lost everything, Salvatore," Vittorio said, his voice carrying through the cavernous space. "The commission will hear the truth tonight. The evidence has already been distributed to trusted captains across all 5 families. Even if you kill me, your betrayal will be known to all." Salvatore's composure finally cracked, desperation replacing calculation in his eyes. "You stupid boy! Do you think this ends with me? The De Lucas have infiltrated every level of your organization. Loyal men have already been eliminated. Your precious empire is burning while you chase ghosts from the past." As if to punctuate his words, another explosion rocked the building. Closer this time, flames becoming visible from the direction of the main entrance. The distillery, with its decades of dust and residual alcohol permeating the wood, would become an inferno within minutes. "Then we burn together, Uncle," Vittorio replied with grim finality. "A fitting end for the Moretti brothers' sons." Salvatore raised his weapon, genuine fear finally breaking through his arrogance. "I won't die here with you. I still have connections, resources you know nothing about." His words were cut short by 3 precise shots, not from Vittorio, but from behind Salvatore. The elder Moretti collapsed forward, blood spreading across his expensive suit, his expression frozen in eternal surprise. Behind him stood Marco Bianchi, Vittorio's consigliere, pale from his hospital escape, but steady as he lowered his smoking weapon. "For Antonio Moretti," the older man said quietly, "a debt 25 years overdue." Vittorio stared at his fallen uncle, the architect of so much pain and betrayal, now nothing more than another body in the long, bloody history of their family. There was no satisfaction in the sight, only a hollow acknowledgement of justice long delayed. "The building's coming down," Marco warned, nodding toward the spreading flames. "Your sister." "With Isabella, heading for the tunnel," Vittorio replied, already moving toward the stairwell. "Get our men out. I'll meet you at the backup location." They separated, Marco heading toward the remaining Moretti soldiers, while Vittorio raced toward the tunnel entrance. Smoke was beginning to fill the lower levels, the ancient timbers of the building feeding the growing blaze. He found Isabella and Maria at the tunnel entrance, Maria refusing to descend without confirmation her brother was following. "Vittorio!" she cried with relief, throwing herself into his arms despite her usual composure. "Salvatore." "Dead," Vittorio replied simply. "Marco found us. It's over." The siblings embraced briefly before Vittorio urged them into the tunnel, the roar of the fire growing louder behind them. As they moved through the narrow passage, the building above them groaned and shifted, structural supports beginning to fail under the assault of the flames. "Faster!" Vittorio ordered, taking up the rear position as debris began falling through cracks in the tunnel ceiling. They emerged from the waterside entrance just as a massive section of the distillery collapsed inward, flames shooting skyward in a funeral pyre for Salvatore Moretti and the corrupt empire he had tried to build. From their position on the shoreline, they watched as fire trucks and police cars converged on the scene, sirens wailing through the night. The Moretti Empire was indeed in flames, but not in the way Salvatore had predicted. "What now?" Maria asked, her voice small but determined as she looked to her brother. Vittorio's gaze moved from the burning building to Isabella, who stood slightly apart, watching him with an unreadable expression. In the firelight, he saw not just the woman who had risked everything to bring him the truth, but a reflection of his own father's vision for the Moretti legacy, built on honor as much as power, on loyalty as much as fear. "Now we rebuild," he said quietly, "the right way." As they moved away from the destruction toward the waiting car where Marco and the loyal capos would meet them, Vittorio knew the hardest battles still lay ahead. The commission meeting, the De Luca threat, the purging of traitors from his organization, all would require strength and strategy. But for the first time since his father's death, Don Vittorio Moretti felt the clarity of purpose that came with truth. And beside him walked the woman who had made that possible. Isabella Vega, granddaughter of Angelo Visconti, who had kept faith with Antonio Moretti's memory through decades of exile and silence. The night air carried the scent of smoke and destruction, but also the promise of renewal. An empire in flames could rise again, forged stronger in the crucible of betrayal and vindication. The safe house in Staten Island hummed with tense energy as Vittorio prepared for the commission meeting. 2 hours had passed since the distillery inferno, barely enough time to regroup and formulate a strategy for the confrontation to come. Maria had been escorted to a secure location upstate, accompanied by Vittorio's most trusted guards. Now, in the living room of the modest waterfront property, the remaining loyal members of the Moretti organization awaited their leader's instructions. Marco Bianchi, still pale from his hospital wounds but resolute, sat reviewing the evidence from Angelo Visconti's portfolio. 3 capos, Franco's younger brother Enzo, veteran soldier Dominic Russo, and the calculating Pietro Zanetti represented all that remained of Vittorio's inner circle after the day's bloodshed. Isabella stood by the window, watching the lights of Manhattan across the harbor. She had changed from her smoke-damaged clothes into a simple black dress borrowed from the safe house supplies, appropriate attire for the solemn occasion that would decide the future of the Moretti family. "The commission will expect weakness," Marco observed, looking up from the documents. "They'll think the loss of Salvatore and so many captains has left us vulnerable." "Let them," Vittorio replied, adjusting the cufflinks on his immaculate suit, a man preparing for battle in the uniform of his choosing. "Underestimation has always been our greatest advantage." His shoulder had been bandaged where Salvatore's bullet had grazed him, the wound hidden beneath his tailored jacket. No sign of weakness could be displayed tonight, not in front of the heads of New York's 5 dominant crime families. "Our position is stronger than they know," Pietro added. "The evidence against Salvatore proves he betrayed not just the Moretti family, but violated commission rules by making unauthorized arrangements with the De Lucas." Vittorio nodded, his expression grave. "The De Lucas remain our most immediate threat. After tonight's meeting, they'll realize their inside man is gone. They'll move quickly to capitalize on our perceived weakness." "Unless we move first," Enzo suggested, the hunger for vengeance for his brother's death evident in his voice. "Patience," Vittorio cautioned. "First we secure our position with the commission, then we address the De Luca problem permanently." Throughout the strategy discussion, Isabella remained silent, an observer to the inner workings of a world few outsiders ever witnessed. Vittorio was acutely aware of her presence, the linguist who had navigated her way into the heart of his organization and, against all odds, proven herself trustworthy in the crucible of betrayal and violence. As the meeting concluded and the men dispersed to make final preparations, Vittorio approached her by the window. "You don't have to attend tonight," he said quietly. "Your grandfather's obligation has been fulfilled. You've done more than enough." Isabella turned from the view of the harbor, her expression resolute. "My grandfather spent 25 years in exile, carrying the burden of your father's trust. I didn't come this far to miss the resolution." "The commission meeting is no place for outsiders," Vittorio cautioned. "These men are dangerous, suspicious by nature. Your presence could be misinterpreted." "Then give me a role that makes sense," she countered. "I speak 6 languages better than any translator they could hire. Present me as your diplomatic advisor, someone who helps navigate international business relationships." Vittorio studied her with newfound appreciation. In less than a week, this woman had shown more loyalty, courage, and strategic thinking than men who had served him for years. "Why are you still here, Isabella?" he asked directly. "The danger has only increased. You could walk away, return to your life, your career." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her composed features. "Would you believe me if I said I feel obligated to see this through to the end?" "No," Vittorio replied with unexpected gentleness. "I think you're here for the same reason I haven't sent you away, something neither of us expected when you spoke those words in my family's code." The air between them seemed to charge with unspoken recognition, a connection formed through shared danger and reluctant trust, now evolving into something neither had anticipated. Before Isabella could respond, Marco appeared at the doorway. "It's time, boss. Our escort is ready." Vittorio held Isabella's gaze a moment longer, then nodded. "You'll come as my advisor. Stay close to Marco. Say nothing unless directly addressed." The commission meeting was held in an old Italian social club in a quiet corner of Staten Island, neutral territory by long-standing agreement. As Vittorio's convoy approached, the streets surrounding the venue were conspicuously empty, local residents having learned over generations to disappear when certain black cars arrived in their neighborhood. Security was elaborate, but discreet, Each family was permitted 3 representatives: the boss, consigliere, and 1 capo. Weapons were checked at the entrance, a formality more than a practicality, as everyone present knew a dozen ways to kill without conventional arms. Inside, the main room had been arranged with a large oval table, 5 positions clearly delineated for the heads of each family. As Vittorio entered with Marco and Enzo, conversations hushed, all eyes turning to assess the Moretti heir whose organization had suffered such dramatic upheaval. Isabella followed slightly behind, her presence drawing curious and suspicious glances. Vittorio noted with satisfaction that none of Salvatore's allies appeared surprised by his survival. His uncle had clearly not had time to inform them of the confrontation at the distillery before his death. Don Calabrese, an imposing man in his 60s with steel-gray hair and cold eyes, spoke first. "Don Moretti, we were expecting your uncle as the Moretti representative tonight." "My uncle is dead," Vittorio replied simply, taking the seat reserved for his family. "His betrayal of our family has been addressed according to our traditions." Murmurs circulated the room, the other bosses exchanging glances as they recalculated alliances and power dynamics in light of this revelation. Don Lucchesi, the oldest present at 78, leaned forward. "Serious accusations require evidence, young Moretti. Salvatore was respected among us for many years." "As was my father before him," Vittorio countered, signaling Marco to distribute folders to each family head. These documents detail 25 years of betrayal, not just against the Moretti family, but against commission rules and territories. As the other bosses reviewed the evidence, financial records, communications, witness statements compiled by Angelo Visconti, Vittorio noted Don DeLuca's growing discomfort. The Chicago interloper, a heavy-set man with a perpetual sneer, shifted in his seat, eyes darting to his consigliere. "These papers prove nothing," DeLuca declared, pushing the folder away. "Old transactions, business dealings between associates. Nothing here justifies executing a respected family leader without commission approval." "Perhaps this will be more convincing," Vittorio replied, nodding to Marco, who placed a small recorder on the table. "My father's own words, recorded 3 days before his murder." The playback of Antonio Moretti's voice, acknowledging Salvatore's betrayal and his arrangement with the DeLucas, created a profound silence in the room. Even the most hardened bosses recognized the significance of hearing a dead man name his killer, especially when that killer was his own brother. When the recording ended, Don Calabrese was the first to speak. "The Moretti family business is your own, Vittorio, but Salvatore's arrangement with the DeLucas violated our territorial agreements. This affects us all." Don Lucchesi nodded slowly. "The commission has rules for a reason. Salvatore's actions threaten the balance we maintain." Vittorio's gaze moved deliberately to Don DeLuca. "Which brings us to the matter of Chicago's unauthorized expansion into New York territories. An expansion facilitated by my uncle's betrayal, but clearly orchestrated by others at this table." DeLuca's face flushed with anger. "Watch your accusations, boy. You may have eliminated Salvatore, but the DeLuca family is not so easily intimidated." "This isn't about intimidation," Vittorio replied, his voice deadly calm. "This is about consequences. Your arrangement with my uncle died with him. You have 24 hours to withdraw all DeLuca operations from New York territories and provide appropriate compensation for the men lost to your interference." DeLuca laughed incredulously. "You're in no position to make demands, Moretti. Your organization is in shambles, your captain's dead or scattered. You sit here with a translator and 2 old men trying to project strength you no longer possess." Isabella, who had been silent and observant, suddenly spoke in flawless Italian, translating Don Calabrese's whispered comment to his consigliere, a comment suggesting he found DeLuca's arrogance distasteful. DeLuca turned to her in surprise, then growing uneasy as she switched to Russian to translate another whispered exchange between Lucchesi's men. My advisor, Ms. Vega," Vittorio introduced with subtle pride, fluent in 10 languages, including the private conversations happening around this table. The demonstration had its intended effect, creating discomfort among those who assumed their asides were protected by language barriers. Isabella's serene smile conveyed clear warning. Nothing spoken in this room was truly private. Don Calabrese cleared his throat. Don Moretti's terms seem reasonable, considering the evidence presented. The De Luca expansion violated long-standing territorial agreements. Agreed, Don Lucchese added, his ancient eyes sharp despite his years. Chicago has overreached. The Commission supports Moretti's right to defend his legitimate territories. De Luca looked around the table, realizing he had lost crucial support. "This isn't over, Moretti," he snarled, rising abruptly. "You'll regret making an enemy of the De Luca family." "I already regret the time wasted on this conversation," Vittorio replied calmly. 24 hours, Don De Luca. After that, we discuss this matter in a different language entirely." After De Luca stormed out, the remaining commission members addressed other business. Redistribution of certain Moretti territories that had been compromised during Salvatore's betrayal, reassurance of legitimate business partners who might be unsettled by the recent violence, and the delicate matter of law enforcement attention following the distillery fire. Throughout the proceedings, Vittorio demonstrated the leadership qualities that had earned his father's respect decades earlier. Decisive without being impulsive, firm without being inflexible, respectful of tradition while pragmatic about necessary changes. By the meeting's conclusion, what had begun as a tribunal for a weakened organization had transformed into a recognition of Vittorio Moretti's legitimate claim to his family's legacy. The other bosses departed with newfound respect for Antonio Moretti's son, and the clear understanding that the Moretti family would not be easily dismantled, despite Salvatore's best efforts. As they returned to their vehicles, Marco squeezed Vittorio's shoulder. "Your father would be proud," he said quietly. "You've done what he never had the chance to do, expose Salvatore and reclaim our family's honor." "We're not finished," Vittorio replied, his expression hardening. "De Luca will retaliate. We need to be prepared." "Already in motion," Enzo assured him. "Our men are securing all critical properties. Additional security has been assigned to Maria and other family members. Nothing will catch us unprepared again." During the drive back to the main Moretti compound in Manhattan, the first time Vittorio had returned to his official residence since the crisis began, he found himself seated beside Isabella, a momentary privacy created by the partition between them and the front seat. "You were impressive tonight," he acknowledged. "The language demonstration was particularly effective." A small smile touched her lips. 5 years at the UN taught me that nothing unsettles powerful men like realizing their private comments aren't so private." "What happens now?" Vittorio asked, the question encompassing far more than the immediate tactical concerns. "Your grandfather's mission is complete. Your debt to my father is paid." Isabella studied him for a long moment. "In my grandfather's final days, he told me something I haven't shared until now. He said Antonio Moretti once told him that if anything happened, he wanted Angelo to guide his son, to help him become the leader the family needed, not just the boss it would follow." "And now?" Vittorio prompted, aware of the subtle shift in the air between them. "Now I see what my grandfather saw, the son of Antonio Moretti, worthy of the legacy he carries." Her eyes held his with surprising intensity. "The question isn't what happens with me, Vittorio. It's whether you're ready to accept what's already happening between us." The car slowed as they approached the Moretti compound, security gates opening to admit them to the fortress-like mansion that had been the family's headquarters for 3 generations. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking over Manhattan, symbolic timing for the new era beginning for the Moretti organization. "I was raised to believe attachments are weakness," Vittorio said quietly. "My father lost his life because he trusted family. His brother betrayed him, killed him, nearly destroyed everything he built. And yet you risked everything to save your sister, Isabella countered, because some bonds strengthen rather than weaken. As the car stopped in the courtyard, Vittorio made no move to exit, instead turning fully toward her. "Stay," he said simply, "not because of your grandfather's obligation or your linguistic skills. Stay because I want you here, because I trust you in ways I've trusted no one since my father's death." Isabella's composure finally softened, vulnerability showing through her collected exterior. "The world you're offering isn't one I ever expected to enter. It's dangerous, complicated." "It's my world," Vittorio interrupted gently, "and after these past days, I think perhaps it's become yours too." Their moment was interrupted as the doors opened, Marco appearing with updates requiring immediate attention. The De Lucas were already withdrawing from contested territories, though intelligence suggested they were regrouping rather than surrendering. Key captains loyal to Salvatore had been identified and contained. The organization was stabilizing faster than expected, loyalty to Antonio Moretti's son proving stronger than Salvatore's machinations. Throughout the day that followed, as Vittorio systematically reclaimed control of his empire, Isabella remained by his side, observing, occasionally advising, her presence a reminder of the truth that had almost been buried forever. Her linguistic skills proved invaluable as international associates were reassured, her analytical mind offering fresh perspectives on organizational weaknesses Salvatore had created. That evening, as sunset painted the Manhattan skyline in hues of gold and crimson, Vittorio found Isabella on the terrace of his penthouse, gazing out at the city that had been his family's domain for generations. "The De Lucas have crossed back into Chicago territory," he informed her, joining her at the railing. "Their New York operations have been dismantled. Our informants report Don De Luca is facing serious questions from his own captains about his failed expansion." "It's not over," she observed. "Men like De Luca don't forgive humiliation." "No," Vittorio agreed, "but neither do I. When he returns, and he will, we'll be ready." A comfortable silence fell between them, the kind possible only between people who had faced death together and emerged with deeper understanding. Finally, Isabella turned to face him fully. "I've been thinking about my grandfather," she said. "He spent 25 years in exile, carrying the burden of your father's trust, knowing the truth but unable to act on it. His entire life became defined by a promise made to Antonio Moretti." "A promise now fulfilled," Vittorio acknowledged. "Yes." Isabella's eyes met his with newfound certainty. "Which means I'm free to make my own choices, to forge my own connection to the Moretti family, not through obligation or history, but through choice." Vittorio took her hand, the gesture startlingly intimate from a man whose touch usually signaled either threat or final judgment. "And what choice do you make, Isabella Vega?" "To stay," she replied simply, "not as Angelo Visconti's granddaughter, but as myself, to help rebuild what was nearly destroyed, to stand beside the man who reclaimed his father's legacy." "It won't be easy," Vittorio warned, though his hand remained clasped with hers. "The life I lead comes with dangers few can imagine, responsibilities fewer still can bear." "I've seen your world at its worst," Isabella reminded him. "The betrayal, the violence, the constant vigilance. But I've also seen what it could be under the right leadership, your leadership." As the last light of day faded into the Manhattan night, Don Vittorio Moretti made a decision that would reshape not just his personal future, but the destiny of his entire organization. Pulling Isabella gently toward him, he sealed their new alliance with a kiss that carried the weight of everything they had endured together: the danger, the truth, the unexpected bond forged in the crucible of family loyalty and personal choice. When they parted, Vittorio's expression held a rare vulnerability, visible only to the woman who had earned not just his trust, but his heart. "My father believed family was everything," he said softly. "Perhaps it's time to expand what family means." Isabella smiled, the linguistic expert who had decoded not just the Moretti family's secret code, but the complex man who carried its legacy. "La famiglia è tutto, il sangue non è acqua," she quoted. The phrase that had begun their dangerous journey now transformed into a promise for the future. Family is everything. Blood is not water. In the penthouse above a city that bore the invisible imprint of generations of Moretti influence, a new chapter began, not just for Vittorio and Isabella, but for an empire reborn from betrayal's ashes, stronger for the truth that had nearly been lost forever, and guided by the unexpected partnership of a Mafia don and the linguist who had spoken his family's secret code with perfect, destiny-altering precision.